You. For more, we're bringing in our political panel tonight. NewsNation political contributor Kurt Bardella, Republican strategist John Thomas. Gentlemen, welcome both. We have a breaking development. The president just posting on Truth Social that House Republicans should vote to release the Epstein files because we, quote, have nothing to hide. Kurt, I want to get your immediate reaction to this.
Well, he sees the writing on the wall after spending the last week trying to convince Republicans like Congresswoman Lauren Boebert not to sign on to the discharge petition that would force the vote anyway. The White House is kind of going, okay, like we've lost this one. We might as well make the best of it. Let everyone vote for it so it's not used as a political hit against any Republican in the midterm elections. And the file's going to come out one way or the other anyway. So this is kind of trying to salvage face right now.
Yeah, John, are you surprised by the sudden change from the president?
Not terribly surprised because pressure from within Trump's own party has been mounting. But look, I think this is totally the right thing to do. The president campaigned for re-election in 2024 on releasing the Epstein files. When his administration under Bondi kind of only half-heartedly released information on that disappointed a lot of President Trump's base, including elected officials within his own party. Look, transparency is the only way Trump is going to move past this. And I tend to agree with President Trump's tweet, which is if there were a there, it would have been released under Joe Biden's Department of Justice. I think you just have to rip off the Band-Aid and get through this.
John, let's stay with you. You mentioned transparency. What do Republicans say to critics who say they see this as a strategic shift, not a transparency move?
Well, at the end of the day, if they're releasing the files, I mean, that is sunlight and transparency. So, look, I think personally the Republicans should have released this originally. It shouldn't have taken this long, but better late than never. And then the media and the American public can pour through and see what is inside.
Kurt, I want to go over to you with something that John just brought up, and we've heard this echoed by two other GOP panelists that we had on the show last night. This idea that if there was a there, that the Biden administration would have discovered it, they would have publicized it, they would have released it, they would have weaponized it in those 4 years, that should be enough to tell us that Trump is not implicated in any major way. What is your response to that?
Well, the problem with that talking point is those Epstein files were under court order not to be released until 2025. So in order for that to have happened, the president, then Joe Biden, would have had to have superseded the court order, which in this country, at least for now, with our checks and balance system, you're not allowed to do, legally speaking. So as convenient as it is for Republicans to say, well, if there was a there, Biden would have released it, they're ignoring the fact that Biden by law was prohibited from doing so.
John, I want to give you a chance to respond.
Yeah, I would just say, Kurt, I mean, assuming that the Democrats played by the rules, which they don't. I mean, they released Trump's tax return. They released Trump's tax returns. That wasn't legal. Those were private.
He said he would release them when he ran for president.
Okay, he said, but he never did. But here's the thing: the Democrats certainly, or somebody would have leaked this information. I think really what's going on here, I think the president's going to be just fine. I think the bigger issue is there are a lot of names in those files that implicate private citizens that we probably haven't heard yet, many of whom don't want their name to get dragged through the mud. And my guess here is President Trump was sparing a lot of these people the scrutiny of being associated with Epstein. I really don't think this has too much to do with President Trump because it would have come out by now.
Kurt, can I ask you an uncomfortable question for the left? I understand that there was red tape that made it so that Biden could not ethically, legally release something like that. Was this a grenade that could have exploded in both directions? Were there big Democratic names, Democratic donors potentially implicated here, where it just would not have been worth it for the left or the Democratic Party to publicize and go down this road?
I'm happy to believe that if there are, then they should be called out publicly. They should be exposed. They should be held accountable. And that the Democratic Party is better to be rid of scum of the earth like that who are associating with a known, I'm not going to say the word pedophile because we know that's a loaded word right now, but someone who at least was trafficking and just despicable, immoral and reprehensible conduct where if any Democrats associated with that, get the hell out.
All right, Kurt Bardella, John Thomas, we're out of time, but I appreciate you both jumping in on this breaking development. Thank you.
Thanks.
Anytime.
All right, the hemp industry facing a major shakeup from a federal law change in the